2002, during a wedding weekend of all things. Some people might find a joke in there, shit joking. I had a nervous breakdown at the wedding. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my family history, which I think plays a little bit into can or cannot, especially with dual diagnosis. I grew up in a family where alcohol was rampant or active. My mother grew up in an alcoholic town here in Mobile up in Spring Hill, and she went off to college and met my father, who was a Vietnam veteran, and an alcoholic as a result of that experience. He went to Alabama, dropped out, enrolled in the Marine Corps for 3 years. He spent the last 8 months in Vietnam. Is there any mental illness coming out of that? I don't know, but it could be. I was diagnosed with dyslexia in the 2nd grade, and school proved to be difficult my whole life, from grade school, high school, and college. I went to some school 3 years in a row, beginning in 3rd grade, had tutored from 4th grade all the way up to college, and repeated the 5th grade. It was a very demoralizing experience for me. And then in the 8th grade, I began drinking alcohol. Went to McGill. My one goal at McGill was to avoid going to summer school, and I was successful, but school continued to be difficult. I struggled with writing, public speaking, and it was just never fun. School was never fun at Auburn. Academically, it wasn't fun in high school, it wasn't fun in grade school, and I didn't like who I was. The impact it had on my self-esteem, self-worth, made me not like who I was. So I drank a lot. My junior year, our family business, construction, went bankrupt, and I changed to move into a house. Drinking went from a lot of fun in the 8th grade, freshman and sophomore year, to being no fun. And I made my way into AA my junior year, and that was really a turning point in my life, getting sober, and I guess having developed a spiritual connection with God, learning to kind of change how I live my life and clean up my past. Anybody that's been in AA will tell you usually it's the best decision I ever made, and it was true for me. Continued to go to college, went off to Auburn. Unlike my father, my mother went to Alabama, and my father had the ability to graduate. Also, because I was sober in high school and then into college, I chose to go to Auburn. Writing and public speaking continued to prove difficult. I remained sober, and I finished on the 5-year program with a C average. Wanted to go to law school, but had the grades for it. After I went back to college, I went up to Atlanta and got a job at Georgia Pacific. Met my wife there and got fired a couple of months later. And due to my learning disability, on other issues such as writing and public speaking, I could never really stick with any company for more than a year and a half. And that doesn't play well into one's self-esteem or to a relationship. My corporate career lasted all of 9 years. I worked for 7 companies, and I was fired 4 times. So it was a struggle. And anyway, as I said, my wedding day, career problems, but caused financial problems. It's the reason why we dated for 5 years. My parents didn't like me from the beginning. They told me so, and that certainly was another stressor perfect family. And if you got a speaking problem, if you're not good at public speaking, then giving a toast is a crisis, and it was for me. And so it's just another stressor in my life that personally didn't need, but they thought I needed to give the perfect speech. On top of it, my mother-in-law wouldn't dance with me. So if you really want any kind of confirmation this is not in one's head, she didn't dance with me. Her best friend stepped forward and we danced. And of course, my wedding party probably didn't even realize it, but I did. Anyway, we went to Costa Rica on our honeymoon. I was manic, and I'd wake up early, stay up late, and that continued as we came back home. We live right here on Dolphin Street, and instead of that job, I had work. I was still caught up in that honeymoon experience of Costa Rica. So I'd stay up at night, listening to music. I was getting emotional, and I was on my way to really, I guess, a psychotic episode. I just didn't know it. By early July, finally, my family begged me to go get help, and I had already had several manic episodes from sleeping, getting up at 3 in the morning, going to work, and just mind deteriorating. I was in the 5th floor for 4 days. The last day, my psychiatrist I met for the first time comes in and gives me a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and I'm discharged that day. Really didn't whatever they gave me, still manic, and didn't believe the diagnosis, which is not unusual. And anyway, went to my first appointment with my psychiatrist, who was in a group at Alabama site on Lamar, and I didn't like him, and I fired him. And he put me with one of his female colleagues. When I came out of the infirmary, I started writing for the first time, and I knew something was up. This was different. I was writing a whole essay, a page or so. Took an IQ test, scored 142. That was up from about 100 in the 8th grade. So when you're the patient and everybody around you thinks you're crazy, this is a piece of critical information that I had to hold on to, that nobody else cared to believe or wanted to hear. So anyway, I went and saw the psychiatrist a couple more times, still unconvinced of my condition, didn't take medication. In 2003, we had our first anniversary, and she made arrangements for us to go to Appalachicola, Florida, to just stay at a hotel for the weekend. Well, the embarrassment and all the emotions related to what had happened at the wedding and really, leading up to the 5th floor, just bubbled up. I was still sober. I had 14 years of sobriety at this point. And so when you're not drinking and drugging, as is very common, that dual diagnosis, if you're sober, then you're going to experience these emotions that everybody else is going to either pick up a cigarette, pick up a drink, pick up a joint, try to suppress it. And so anyway, she backed out of the trip on Friday morning, and I found a friend to go in her place. It's where two doctors, two law enforcement officials can evaluate you and then determine based on that evaluation whether you should be hospitalized or not. So it's a really 24, 48-hour crisis situation. And so I spent the night in the jail. They did not book me into jail as I have been booked into jail before. And they just evaluated me overnight. I couldn't really sleep. And based on their observations of my behavior, I was transported the next morning to Tallahassee to a facility there. And I spent a week, and it was a very difficult experience for me and probably for them. And I think they called my wife and told her to come get me. And they let me out. And that was, that was right there April 20th. Not a month, 5 weeks later, I'm still manic, really didn't get treated. My wife goes out of town, and without her, I've been with her for 5, 6 years now, and her absence just kind of affected my orientation. And anyway, I took a road trip, 24 hours, all the way to Freeport, where my father's family's from, and spent 3 hours with my grandmother, upsetting her, and then got back in the car and came back. I spent the night in Metro Jail, had a commitment hearing the next day. My mother committed me, and Judge John Davis, ruled in her favor. I was sent to Searcy Hospital, but before I went to Searcy, I went out to Bay Point, which is the old charter hospital, if you're familiar with that. And that was kind of a holding facility for those of us who were court ordered. And I was there for 4 weeks. I've come to learn it takes me about 3 weeks to stabilize once if I'm on the right protocol of medication. And so I was pretty stable by the time I got up to Searcy. It's scary, not knowing what a mental institution is like. It's just scary. Fortunately for me, I had a short trip up there of 16 days. The judges and Searcy was under a ton of pressure that year, as it probably has been every year, to get people from the county jails and the county hospitals and get them up to Searcy for treatments. And so I had a meeting with the committee of doctors, and it was on day 14. And in that hearing, they wanted me to stay for a full month. And I asked the question related to my leaving, and the next morning a doctor walked right by me on the floor and told me to make arrangements to get home. And the judges were wanting to free up bed space. I was picked as one of the career didn't work, and school had not worked the first time, so, but I did go back to graduate school in counseling at South, and I had almost a year under my belt. I was a A student somehow, and anyway, she comes home. She's been let go from her company of 5 years, and they do it 30 days, and they're not replacing her position. So she wanted to go home. She was from Virginia, and she wanted to go to North Carolina and live with her sister and her family. And that is, again, understanding how the illness works and how emotions can flip somebody into mania or to this psychotic episode. I found, sadly, the doctors generally don't have an interest in understanding what triggered you out. You're out of the hospital, you're back in their office after a month, 2 months, 3 months they hadn't seen you. And they don't want to know what happened. They just want to make sure that they're back. They don't want to be guilty. They don't want to be, I think they have conscience about you getting sick on their watch and it being a reflection of them. And so all they're interested in is getting you stable. And not really interested in understanding the episodes. I had a great doctor for 5 or 6 years. She never had any interest in, here she is in her profession, and didn't want to ask me the questions, and so, anyway. The turning point in my life was this book called Touched with Fire by Kay Redfield Jameson. Anybody read it, seen it? It's a must. Everybody needs to buy it tonight on Amazon and get it sent to you. It's that important of a book. And Kay is a professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. She's very brilliant. She's written a number of books on suicide, on her own story. She has bipolar disorder. And what I learned from the book was that Aristotle and Socrates were both aware of mental illness. I think our culture kind of gives the impression that mental illness is kind of like a 50-year-old problem or something, 100-year-old problem. But the Greeks, great minds from Greeks knew all about it. They thought that things that came out of their mouth. And she goes on to name all sorts of famous people in the book who have mental illness, from Isaac Newton, who's considered one of the top 10 scientists in the world or ever, Beethoven, and all that up and go. But she also, our school system, from elementary school, high school, college, the people that they draw on the textbooks are a bunch of mentally ill people, from Tennessee Williams, Hemingway, Virginia Woolf, Poe, but the textbooks don't mention all this that this person's mentally ill in science, that this person's mentally ill in music or literature. And so what it collectively does is we as students go through the education system and we come out never knowing this piece of truth about mental illness and its relationship to achievement, to discovery, breakthroughs. And so we all have this bad connotation, the stigma about mental illness. And the truth is that there's just geniuses. Hollywood is full of geniuses who have a mental illness in acting or music, theater, and our society doesn't know the truth. And whether it's education's a conspiracy or not to not reveal this information, I mean, it's one mental illness. In other words, it's kind of like saying if you're an A student in your honor roll in your National Honor Society, you just might be that next. But that's not true. These are geniuses. These are people whose minds are way beyond a straight A kid in school today. And so if you upset that equation, if you challenge education and force them to admit that the C student, the D student, the F student should be just as big of a genius as an A student, then why do you become more why emphasize straight A's, why emphasize good grades or attendance, or it just doesn't really matter. I mean, if you have that, if it's in your destiny to make some sort of, say some statement, make some breakthrough, whether you went to school or not, probably doesn't matter. So, I mean, we politicians, Abraham Lincoln won the war of his era, and Churchill won the war of his era. We got all sorts of crazy philosophers. John Nash, was space mathematician, beautiful mind. Is that my last slide? Anyway, I think, what I told you my story. I've been mentally ill for the last 14 years. I've been compliant for the last 13 years, and I take my meds. I'm a writer. This should be another, okay, here's the stigma. So here's the kids are all going through school. We're not being told the complete truth about achievement and how it really works. Textbooks are omitting the mental illness aspect, and the mental illness is responsible for the breakthroughs, the achievements. With mental illness, like any illness, you got to break through the denial, cancer, diabetes, MS. So until the patient, your family member, you, whoever it is, comes to accept that they have this illness, and then they start complying with the doctor's orders, then they're gonna be bouncing from being stable and on meds, and then feeling good and getting off meds, and then getting sick again. And I'm sure you're all seen that. And so it's really about it's about getting rid of that stigma, coming to terms with who you are as a person, and being okay with your mental illness, and realizing, all the diseases out there, from cancer and its treatment of chemo and radiation to ALS, and you just deteriorate to the point of suffocation. Of all the illnesses, I'd rather have mental illness and take my pills every night than to trade places with people who are wheelchair bound, bed bound, and I mean, it's just a no-brainer. So once, it's like, but you have to kind of work through the denial to kind of come to see, this ain't as bad as the society has made it out to be. So today, since '07, I've been writing. I've written over 120 essays. I built a global audience, right to over 90 universities, 45 of them are world class, and put together a film called The Company of Geniuses on mental illness, and I recently things that leave you with some questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to come speak to you. And
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Ken?
When's your graduation from Middle?
1990.
I'm 86.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the illness is, portrayed the way it is, and I was impressed with NAMI's sponsors for its walk, and how, I don't know the story how all those companies got on board, but I thought that was great, and there's a great story to be told. I mean, unfortunately, if you watch the film and you see the series of people and from history to present who have a mental illness, whether it's depression or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. I mean, you're watching their movies, you're watching their TV shows, they're millionaires, they're beautiful people. I mean, it's like, people just don't know the truth. I mean, that's the problem. That if they were to stop and think about the Kurt Cobains or the Brian Wilsons or Ted Turner built $1 billion business through CNN and Turner Broadcasting, and I mean that's a genius. Vivian Lee, she has bipolar disorder. Marilyn Monroe, I think Tolstoy, just all Sinatra, all these actors whose movies that everybody cites as their favorite movie, and talking about mentally ill people who have a range of emotion that goes out of just what we want to define as normal, and so they're able to pull off talent, pull off an act, or not necessarily an act, but a performance that a lot of other people can't do.
Ken, I have a question. You said there for a while you really had a lot of suicidal thoughts, like almost every single day. You were so depressed. What helped pull you out of, what would help for those parents that
I think that book, Touch of Fire, it just helped me see that this wasn't a 100, 200-year modern society problem, that it was so old. And then there's all these people that they were all in our textbooks, and we all know them, we just didn't know that they were mentally ill. And so that was real, I think that book did me wonders. And I did, in the years that I was really struggling, I went back into AA, and I talked about that struggle. A lot of people didn't think I like Bangor. I mean, I think that might be it. I like Churchill, I like Lincoln, I like politics, I like those guys. And yeah, how would you in the 1940s and 50s, you're mentally ill and you really don't have real treatment, and you're functioning as the prime minister of Great Britain, and apparently he could shoot smears off in his office with his aides, and it's just part of an untreated, untreated person. If you didn't have, I just used alcohol, I never got into drugs, but I can understand how you got to use all the different drugs. If you didn't have access to these psychotropic drugs, then you're going to have to use cocaine when you're down to get you up, and you're going to have to use alcohol, which is a depressant, pull you down, and you're just a chemist, and that's the story of a lot of those guys that, either overdosed or what happened to Prince? Prince, Robin Williams, or, it's,
I just have a comment. I realize that some people, like Robin Williams, has had an illness, but I never thought about, well, they didn't teach us that in school. I mean, you might hear about high behavior about Banco and all these people. I'm thinking now, if they had promoted that, if they had put that in there, we all want to have a mental illness. I mean, who doesn't want to be Einstein or Marilyn Monroe or, somebody awesome like that? It's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, they're brilliant people who, despite everything else, yes, they have survived and thrived and made the world a better place.
well, that's how do you get that message? My way of getting that message is to have a class action lawsuit against the textbook manufacturers and all the education school systems to allow those books to come into their classroom and not the truth. It's not real. And it's an unorthodox approach, but that's usually the stuff that really works, and not begging the superintendent to hear you out and to use your alternative history book. It just gets so involved. And see how much news you make in the process. It's like the kid that shot up the 8 or 9 black churchgoers, and the media tied the flag right to him posing to the state capitol, and then that was like lightning. And that government jumping on board and say we're going to take that flag off our state capitol, whether they like it or not. That, if you and I were to go up to our state senator and say, we sure would like you to take that flag down off the capitol, it would take a lifetime. And it probably didn't get done. But when things are done, I just call it very illogically, it just, things move fast and in a way that trying to start up the first step and then go to the second step, you'll die before you get your task that you want to achieve. So, but that's how I see the problem, is just sitting and we start a lot of trouble. And then you don't even have to win the case. You just have to win the court of public opinion, and people, they won if you can change the public's understanding of the problem. And because it's a tragedy when somebody in our life or somebody down the street gets sick and has an episode, and our first tendency is to want to stay away from the family, when really you say, well, hey, there's another genius born on the street or whatever. I mean, that's a terrible way. I mean, the current reality is nobody wants to come around, nobody brings chicken casseroles to your house when we got somebody in the hospital that just came home from the hospital. So it's a lonely business. And I mean, these hospitals are god awful, and jails are god awful. Why is the only person with a illness in jail somebody with a mental illness? Why would we do that to a heart attack patient, a stroke patient, somebody with diabetes? What we do with the mentally ill in the state of Alabama and a lot of other states, that's where the Baker Act comes into play, to keep the mentally ill out of their criminal justice system, not just incarcerating, but just the whole processing, sending somebody to court that really, needs to be in hospital.
Well, I have a comment not about approaching it from a textbook. We've got to approach it through our families, though, and that's one thing that Mommy has done a wonderful job with. Kay Redfield Jameson's first book, the reason she didn't get help to begin with was because of the stigma, and she was afraid she'd lose her job at UCLA at the time when she was a professor on staff there. But we have got to, as families, be open about this. And I have so much mental illness in my family, so I knew it was coming in my family. I knew it was generation after generation. So I was always open about it because it's not my fault. It wasn't my ill family's fault, and it's not your fault. And that's what we've got to educate people on, not through the textbooks so much, but like going and speaking to schools.
But we don't have enough time to speak it. I get what you're saying.
I'm just saying not necessarily just through textbooks, but we've got to be examples of that too. So I'm not arguing with you here.
My point is that's like you and I try to get the Confederate flag off our Capitol.
Right.
I mean, we could go talk to all the senators up there, all the House members, and all it takes is one or two people to kill it every year, and it never would get done. So you have to think, how would you, if you wanted to make ripples across the country, because this is affecting you, y'all have to live, they say or don't say things to you about your child. You know, to have a sick child and have people not there, they talk about your daughter, they talk about your husband, they talk about everybody but your son because they don't know what to say. I mean, and then you walk away feeling diminished about your own child or your pride, maybe. But I hope y'all come away realizing that this illness, it does have a positive story related to achievement and contribution to society. And without us, things may have taken another 100 years longer to be settled in society for that answer to come out. So, but I don't think we have time to just go to every school, and that would be a very veneer way of approaching something that is much, much deeper, and that's human beings, the lives of people. I mean, AIDS had this same problem, cancer probably had the same problem, and you can pursue or follow what they did, or we got social media, we have technology that makes things quicker to get a message out the door that wasn't around when I got sick in 2002. We had email, but we didn't have Facebook and Twitter and all this other stuff, better information. So,
In your opinion, are there other countries in the world that have a better media information and what are they?
I don't know, but I keep researching it because it's I'm concerned about this country's finances, and I need a place to go if something they stop taking me here.
Well, let us know if you find out.
the doctor, my experience with a psychiatrist, I had a good one, but she couldn't solve my suffering. And that really bothered me when I got a hold of Katie's book, and to see all these, I don't know if it would work for everybody else, every other patient, but it worked for me to see the famous people who had this, and it just made it no more of a big deal anymore. It's like, you know, what am I sweating? You know, it's one thing to be the only person in the world with the condition, and there's no treatment for it, and there's nobody to talk to and console. I mean, that's the value of coming together. And you know, I have two neighbors in my apartment complex who have bipolar disorder, and I know many others over Burnett. I don't know what the people are open about it, and that's, you know, that's a bond that even when we get mad at each other and don't talk to each other for a little bit, I think it's the bond that gets us, brings it back together. And because you just, I mean, families get turned off by their loved one, and you know, just write them off. And I'm kind of in that situation myself. And so, you know, who you call when you're think you're getting sick or whatever, or
Well, it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who
Yeah.
understands the same kind
yeah.
of hardship.
Well, I mean, the other part of it is there's a lot of laughter because we're comparing notes of some of the things we've done, and you know, normal people just get, you know, they've been there, and you know, when you're sick, you're doing things that are beyond your normal personality, and you may end up in jail, you may end up in a institution, and that's just the way it goes. And yeah, to be able to find some humor in that kind of stuff, and share it with other people, that it's not just something bottled up inside of you, an experience that you haven't told anyone. That's a lonely way to live life, and I've made writing about my life and my experiences with mental illness important. And my life's important. I value my life. And the time when somebody who has any kind of sickness sees that, you know, their life's worth fighting for, yeah, I think that's maybe the turning point, and somebody will go to whatever lengths they got to go to get better, get healthier. So, about work, I talked to somebody about this last week at Dolphin Methodist, and yeah, I'm on disability. I write for free, and I have Medicare, have my drugs paid for through Social Medicare, and yeah, it's there's really no incentive to go back to working. Then you get $1,000 a month, you get your health care paid for, and then you could give that all up, and you can also work make another $1,000 a month, but you could give all that up, go to work again, did not work for you, you're either having to reapply for Social Security disability again, and it's you know, you kind of need to hit the lottery or whatever. You need a big jump, and not just some you know. I think self-employment's a good outlet. If you got family members and you're like, do you steer them towards going to work for somebody else? Because if you get sick and you're gone for a month, are they going to save your job? Do they want a mentally ill person coming back to their office? If they don't, then you're constantly having to start over and get another job. And that might as well just be self-employed and cut grass